Hello, welcome to my channel. Today, I will show a recap of a 2007 Canadian movie titled Normal. Spoiler alert. Watch out and take care. Catherine thinks about her late son, Nicky. She says she never expected her son to die early, but her son died at 16. Following the death of Nicky, Catherine becomes destabilized. That day, she watches her husband Dale and her son Brady leave home. She watches the atmosphere news and gives Brady a sweater in case of cold. She returns to the house and behaves irrationally for a while, then goes to her phone. She calls her husband Dale to remind him about their dinner that night. Dale warns her not to call at work and ends the call. At a university, Walter Brower teaches the students, and after the class, a student, Sherry, goes to meet the lecturer. She tells him that she cannot write his assignment as she works at a TV station, so she has not had enough time for herself. The lecturer asks her why she is taking the course, and she tells him it is because she doesn't want her colleague at work to see her as an instrument for cold. At a prison, Geordie is an inmate, and he refuses to join his fellow inmate in playing football. The counselor comes to him and warns him to join the group. He tells him that he doesn't want him to return to the prison again, and Geordie promises he will never come back to the prison. A fellow inmate throws his ball at him, and a fight emerges. Dennis is a partly autistic boy. He receives a call and refuses to answer. He reads some of his mathematical quotations to calm himself down. That evening, Catherine and Dale attend dinner with her friend as planned. During the dinner, Catherine behaves weirdly. He refuses to eat blood meat despite her husband's pleading. That night, Geordie's father comes to pick him up at the prison. He tries to maintain a conversation with him about his discussion with his wife, Elise, but Geordie refuses to hear about Elise. He says Elise isn't his mother, and Elise has no right to decide on his life. They also talk about his sister Carly and how Carly is a better version than Geordie. Catherine returns home tired. Dale carries her to her room and tucks her into the bed. Meanwhile, Walter goes to his sitting room to read a newspaper about their late child. He returns to the room and meets Catherine crying. The next day, Geordie wakes up and tells his father about his life plans. His father didn't seem interested. He only told him he must get a job in a week or else he would leave his house. After his father goes to work, he is with his stepmother Elise. Elise tries to talk with him and tells him his father missed him while away. She asks him to help her with the house chores, but Geordie refuses. She says that when Carly was home, Carly does help her with some house chores. Geordie sarcastically comments that she has a mother-daughter relationship with Carly, but Elise says Carly is her friend. She tells him she knows she isn't their mother, and she isn't claiming she is. Meanwhile, Dale wakes up to prepare for work while Catherine remains in bed. Dale insists that she must take Brady to school that day as they are a family, and he can't keep doing all the work. He tells her to pull herself together and resume her motherly duties. After Dale leaves for work, she asks Brady what time school is and prepares to take him to school. Walter, Dennis's brother, comes home, bringing Dennis emails and books. He sees Dennis reading a mail from a lady named Sylvie. Walter asks him who Sylvie is, and he says Sylvie is a friend who has just been released from prison and wants to meet him. Walter suggests that they meet with Sylvie, but Dennis refuses. Walter visits a therapist to talk about his life. While describing the situation as if it didn't happen to him, he talks about the day he took his brother to therapy. He was waiting for his brother at the bar beside the college and forgot his brother. Naturally, he took the train, but due to the train swamp, he took his car. He hurriedly ran to the door, thinking about his brother. While drunk, he drove the car and collided with another car, which led to the death of a young boy named Nick, Catherine's son. On the other hand, Catherine goes to her son's grave. She drinks there, she leaves there, visits a supermarket, buys some things, and then returns home. Upon getting home, she arranges what she purchased and then enters Nick's room. She looks at all of Nick's awards and rests on his bed. She cries as she sniffs his pillow. Her son, Brady, comes to meet her. He asks permission to visit his friend Alan, but Catherine refuses him. She tells him he can only visit if Alan's parents are around. That day, Geordie goes to find a job, and he sits for an interview at a pizza store. The owner notices he is an ex-convict and asks what his offense was. He tells the owner he stole a car. He is given the job, and he asks him if he can manage their store. Dennis eventually picks up Sylvie's call. He tells Sylvie he isn't free to see anyone. Walter meets his wife Abby at home, and Abby reminds him about their dinner that day. That evening, Abby and Walter go for dinner but are both distracted. Meanwhile, Geordie returns home and wants to masturbate. As he starts his act, his stepmother Elise opens the door without a knock. He screams at her, and she apologizes immediately. He leaves and walks towards the street where he meets his ex-schoolmate and Nicky's girlfriend Melissa. The young girl welcomes him back and invites him to a weekend party. She asks him if he has seen Nick's mother. She says he should at least meet with Nick's mother, but Geordie insists that he is the least person Catherine wants to see. With Walter, Abby tries to have intercourse with her husband, but Walter refuses. She asks him why he left writing for lecturing, and he tells her that's what he wishes to do. Later that day, Abby parks away from the house. She tells Walter she can't manage with him and she will be at her sister's home. That evening, Catherine attempts to visit a supermarket. She sees Geordie coming from the supermarket and hides from Geordie. She enters the supermarket after Geordie leaves. After buying her goods, she returns home and sheds tears. That night, Dennis calls his brother to inform him of Sylvie's call. Walter is distressed about Abby, so he shuns Dennis. He later calls Dennis back to apologize and asks him to call Sylvia the next day. The next day at school, Sherry meets with Walter again. She offers to help him with the book he is holding, and they end up having intercourse in the office. That day during lunch, Brady tells his parents about his improvement in soccer, but Catherine insists Brady should do basketball. She tells him that her grandfather was a basketball player and Nikki was also a basketball player, so if Brady puts his mind to basketball, he will know how to play well. Dale asks her to stop, so she walks out of the dining and Brady leaves too. Meanwhile, Geordie enters Elise's room when his father isn't around. He meets Elise undressed. Elise quickly puts on her towel, and Geordie goes near her. They end up having intercourse. When his father arrives, Geordie hides in the bathroom. His father has intercourse with Elise immediately, and Geordie runs out while his father is busy. That day, Walter takes Sherry to Dennis, but Dennis refuses to meet her, so Walter asks Sherry to go to the car while he prepares Dennis for dinner with Sylvie. After the preparation, he returns to the vehicle, and Sherry gets angry at him. He explains that Dennis was already improving before the accident years ago. Sherry refuses his explanation and asks him to drive her home. On the bed, Elise asks Geordie about the car theft. Geordie tells her it was his idea to steal the car and drive it, and the accident was also his idea. The next day after the lecture, Walter goes to Sherry with a flower. After receiving the flower, Sherry tells him they need a break. Meanwhile, with Brady, he tries to practice how to play basketball. While he practices, Dale gets injured and asks him to bring the first aid box from the kitchen. He goes into the kitchen with the basketball and meets his mother, who gets angry at him for playing with Nikki's ball. Brady angrily replies that Nikki is dead, and even if she keeps all of Nikki's belongings, Nikki will never come back to life. Later that night, Catherine apologizes to Brady, but Brady refuses to hear her out. He returns to his room. The next day while Geordie is at work, Melissa visits to get some pizza, then she waits to take him home that night. He invites her in, and they talk in his bedroom. She tells him that despite being Nikki's girlfriend, she didn't miss Nikki as much as she missed him. They kiss, but Elise comes in to interrupt them. Elise asks Geordie who Melissa is, and Melissa introduces herself. The next time Melissa and Geordie meet, Melissa tells Geordie that Elise looks at her as if she is taking her boyfriend. Geordie angrily changes the conversation and asks her not to talk about Elise. They kiss as they return home. Walter summons the courage to visit Sherry. He meets a man in her room, and the man hits him. Sherry defends him, pulls him into the room and locks the man outside. She helps him with his nosebleed, and they continue their relationship. As they talk, Sherry talks about the first time she saw him. It was during the accident case that she says she was amazed by how collected he was when Catherine tried to attack him. The conversation doesn't sit well with Walter, so he starts wearing his clothes and leaves her house. The next day, Sylvie visits Dennis. Dennis refuses to allow her in, so she agrees to stay behind the door and make them talk behind the door. He gives her a chair, and they share some conversation. That day at work, Geordie's manager, Tim, asks Geordie to clean the bathroom. Geordie complains about the work he has to do, but Tim doesn't give him listening ears. Geordie drops his apron and says he is resigning. He returns home, and Melissa visits him. He enters the house to change his cloth and go out with Melissa. In his room, Elise tries to have a conversation with him, but he refuses her. She follows him outside, but he doesn't give her an audience. Elise watches him as he drives away with Melissa. Later that night, Geordie summons the courage to call Catherine. The next day, he meets Catherine, who expresses her gladness about seeing him. Geordie says he doesn't know if Catherine wants to see him, and he hates himself for what happened. He says he was driving the car because Nikki didn't want to, and he didn't see the driver who drove into them from the left. Catherine, on the other hand, expresses that it was her fault. She says people want her to move on like it didn't happen, but there is no way she can move on. They console each other. Walter is still down as regards Sherry's talks. He receives a call from Dennis, who reminds him it is Thursday, the day heroes with his miles, and also tells him he is going out on dinner with Sylvia that night. Walter tells him he will call him later. Meanwhile, Catherine returns home and burns all of Nikki's properties. She apologizes to Brady for her acts and tells him seeing Nikki's properties and the house brings her hardship, so they will be going on a vacation to his aunt's place. Dale tries to beg her to stay, but she tells him she will never forgive him for moving on after their son's death. Walter gets to Dennis's place late and sees Dennis as left alone. He goes to Catherine's home to apologize to her, but Catherine hits him repeatedly. On the other hand, Geordie returns home to find out that Elise has told his father about their encounters. His father beats him repeatedly and gets wounded too. Catherine leaves with Brady while Melissa comes to pick up Geordie, and they take a bus. Elise also takes Jordy's father to the hospital. Jordy and Melissa kiss as the train moves. At the same time, Dennis and Sylvie laugh and smile as the movie ends. Thanks for watching the recap. Kindly subscribe to our channel to get notified when we post the next recap. See you next time.